Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Mixing Glass. It's me, John, and I am flying solo today. That's right, Brandon has officially let me take the reins all by myself. He's in Mexico right now at the Patron Hacienda, having a good time, learning about agave. So that's why I get to do whatever I want today. Sorry, Brandon, if you're listening, too bad I get to do all of it. But I'm not alone. As you know, we like to bring some amazing guests on the show. And today I have with us Ingrid Folkers. Ingrid is a bartender based out of Raleigh, North Carolina. She has 13 years of industry experience behind the bar and truly has a passion for cocktails and spirits. Ingrid is an expert when it comes to whiskey. In 2023, she was the runner-up for Bartender of the Year for the Women in Whiskey Awards presented by the Bourbon Women Association. She also holds the accreditations of Bourbon Steward with the Stave and Thief Society and has a certification in Canadian Whisky. This year, she also plans to become a Certified Scotch Professional with the Council of Whiskey Masters. Over the last few years, Ingrid has competed in cocktail competitions at various levels. She has won several local competitions and has started to pursue national competitions as well. Most recently, she was named top 30 in USBG Presents World Class, sponsored by Diageo, 2024. She also claimed second place in the 2023 Novo Fogo Cachaça competition, and her cocktail was published in Chilled magazine. Hey, we know those guys. We've had many of them on the show. And Ingrid is also an upcoming finalist in the North Carolina Restaurant and Lodging Association Chef Showdown and Mixology competition. Now, if you're looking to find her bartending in Raleigh, she has just accepted the role of bar manager at a new rooftop bar called High Rail, which is expected to open in October of 2024. Ingrid, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Thanks for being on. We have a few things in common from your bio, so that's really exciting. We can nerd out and get into it, especially when it comes to cocktails and whiskey. Those are some fantastic certifications and programs for bartenders out there, and it's really great to see people taking advantage and jumping into them. Were any of those your favorite?
For certifications, I really enjoyed the Stave and Thief Society one, the Bourbon Steward certification. Bourbon is one of my first loves in the bartending realm, so I definitely had fun with that. I also really enjoyed getting my certification in spirits level 2 with the Wine and Spirit Education Trust. That was a big one that I'm really happy to have achieved.
Oh yeah, that's a really cool one to do too. They just released like their sake certifications too, so those are going to be pretty fun down the road.
Yeah, I saw that.
Well, before we get too far into it, we like to do a little thing we call Roll for Initiative, and I know that you have a 20-sided die over there. You're ready to roll. I know you play D&D just like us, so let's see what you get.
All right. That's a 2.
That's a 2.
That's a 2. It was almost a 20, but it rolled, and now it's a 2.
We haven't had 20 yet. That would have been something. But you get a 2, and you know the lower you roll, the more abstract these questions are. So here we go. Would you rather fight 7 geese-sized horses or 1 horse-sized goose?
Okay, my initial reaction is 1 horse-sized goose.
Okay, 1 giant horse-sized goose.
Because if you take it out, then you're done. As opposed to 7, 7 different things you have to, but the size is a factor. But horses are smart, so even if they're goose size, they're smart. And if they're attacking you, I think I'm going to go with the 1 horse-sized goose.
Yeah, they can get pretty mean. You never know. They're pretty smart too. They're coming after you.
But if you get to jump on the 1, I think you'd be in good shape. It's up in the air, but I think I've got a better chance of 1v1 versus 1v7.
Well, as long as you don't roll another 2 on your die for initiative, I think you're going to make it. Amazing. All right. So let's jump into a little bit of our origin story here. We like to talk about how we all got into the industry, kind of what sucked us in and made us lifers, those career hospitality professionals. So what brought you into the industry and kind of how did we get to where you are today?
Well, I started classically, just bartending to pay for college, which a lot of us uh, began that way.
What'd you
Um,
go
I,
for?
s- my college degree was in communication with a minor in international politics, and I had
Heck yeah.
always intended to either like go into law or like international nonprofits or something like that. Um, have like a very serious career and be a very serious person.
What are
And
you talking
just the
about?
later,
Bartending serious? What are we doing?
in a way, yes, but in a way, it is also a very unserious, in the best way possible, kind of
Super.
career. Um, but yeah, as I got older, I just realized that wasn't the structure that I wanted my life to go at. You know, I didn't want to be like suit and tie 100% of the time, having business meeting after business meeting and doing paperwork my entire life, you know, which is a lot of what I think that career path holds. And I really wanted something that had more of outlet for my creative passions. So began initially just to pay for college, and then it kind of developed into my creative outlet kind of solely. And then it was really not until I traveled a bit and saw what international bartending looked like and how big and vast this kind of community is that I really took a step back and realized like what I want my life to look like in the future, and bartending ticks 90% of those boxes. So that was um, really the turning point for me was, and especially when I was introduced to competitions, that was kind of uh, uh, igniting a fire in me as well.
Heck yeah. All right, I wanna unpack this a little bit. What was that
Mhm.
first job? What was the first kind of place? You don't have to name names or any establishments. You know, we protect the innocent and the guilty. But what was our first job?
Okay, so I'm originally from Iowa. So think more small city kind of. They're a little behind the times, especially in terms of bartending. And this was in 2009,
Sure.
2010-ish. And I worked at a quote unquote martini bar. So think a menu of 150 different cocktails, all served in martini glasses with the suffix teeny attached to
Sure.
it.
With the
So
Kuiper rainbow.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So that was my first job, and I really enjoyed how fast paced it was because we would get tickets for you know 20 different martinis from one group that we would have to rock out in
All
a
different, of
timely
course.
manner.
All different.
All different,
Sure.
and I don't know. I just really enjoyed the fast paced, like nothing's boring about it. That's for sure. I enjoyed that aspect. And then my next job after that was at a whiskey bar, which really ignited my passion for whiskey. And that's kind of the first hook in the bartending journey that I had. Previous to that, I was still like, okay, I'm gonna, finish my degree and go on to this career path that I had seen for myself. But once I was really introduced to whiskey and like how cool and niche and uh, how much there is to learn about whiskey, that was like the first hook where I'm like, ooh, I like this. I could definitely spend more time learning about whiskey, especially teaching about whiskey was a big draw for me as well. I
Especially in
like
that time
sharing.
period too. That's when everything started to get really crazy
Yeah,
in
that
the
was like
beer
the
world.
beginning-ish of the bourbon boom. So, well, in Iowa, I'm sure it had started several years prior elsewhere, but
Yeah.
you
It
know.
takes time to spread ideas, right?
Yeah, especially to this, middle of the Midwest, it takes a little bit more time, but they'll get there.
Yeah, it's worth it.
Yeah.
So then you started traveling, you said too. Was there anywhere in particular that kind of grabbed your interest and like gave you that focus, for making this the actual career? Or was it just a conglomeration of everything?
Um, Definitely still sort of a conglomeration of everything, but I do remember specifically I did a year in Australia on a work holiday visa where I spent the majority of my time working at music festivals, which is a great experience. And
Oh, so much fun.
yeah, amazing. But the other part of the time I was working in bars because I'd already had bartending experience. And um, I remember specifically I was working in Darwin, Australia, and which is another like very small city. Um, and I remember being introduced to like that's where I really was introduced to cocktail competitions and some really elevated levels of bartending as opposed to making random cocktails and putting everything in a martini
Yeah,
glass and,
in the middle of
you know,
Iowa.
in the middle of Iowa. So that was, I remember a specific moment where I was working with the bar manager at the place that I was working with, and we were talking about cocktail creation, and she was really introducing me to more of a culinary approach to making cocktails, which really opened my eyes. It was previously not the approach I had taken to cocktails, even though I'd been behind the bar for like 3 or 4 years at that time. And so that I remember as being a very defining moment in my journey of cocktails for sure, is learning like, oh, you can treat this like a chef would treat a dish, and that makes perfect sense. And why had I not thought of that before? And it all seems very like basic and not revolutionary in any sense, but in that moment, it was very a formative moment for me, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So then how did you take all of that information that you were gathering and bring it to Raleigh, North Carolina? How did we get to where you are now?
Um, well, I knew I wanted to do more things in the bartending community. And Iowa, as much as I love it and as much as I love everyone that is there still, it just didn't have as much of an opportunity as going to like the East Coast would, or going to a larger city. And my partner is also a bartender. So we kind of searched around. We knew we wanted to be on the East Coast because of cost of living and just proximity to other big cities. And we kind of pulled Raleigh out of thin air just because we'd seen a couple articles saying how Raleigh's food and beverage scene was up and coming.
Sure.
And
Had
we're
you had
like,
never been
well,
there before?
nope, we moved.
Love it.
We sold like everything that we couldn't fit into our two cars, took what we could fit, and then showed up and we're like, oh, okay. You know,
Sight
we always,
unseen. Just
yeah,
pack it all
exactly.
and go. Did you have jobs lined up?
No, we
Amazing.
had we had prepaid for 1 month of an Airbnb, and we're like, 1 month will be enough to figure out everything.
Sure, we're
So
bartenders. We got this. We have charisma. You have a degree in
exactly.
communications. You're gonna figure it out.
Yeah, and we did, and it was fine. And I mean, we've been in Raleigh now for 2.5 years. We just signed a lease for another year, so we'll be here for at least 3.5 years. So we've always said that if we don't like it, we'll leave because we're, like you said, we're both bartenders. We can just
Yeah.
travel, leave, pick up and. Whenever we want. But so far, we're enjoying the city.
Heck yeah. So the next step for your career is to get into competitions. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, because you talk about this thing like that I find a lot of really successful bartenders do. You start with kind of high volume, you work your way into craft, you find a balance in between the two. Then you start to branch out. Maybe you do festivals, maybe you do pop-ups, you do private events, you work at conferences like Tales of the Cocktail, etc. And then inevitably you kind of fall into these competitions. So let's talk about your journey, and starting at the beginning. What was your first cocktail competition? What was the one you dipped your toe into the water?
My first competition was actually held by the Iowa Restaurant Association in 2018. And I was signed up by my boss, and like
Now,
it
did you know
was,
about it, or did you just find out, hey, I made you do this thing?
he said, "Do you have interest in this?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Good, I signed you up."
Perfect.
So it was like he asked my permission, but he had already signed me up. But like if I had said I didn't want to do it, he wouldn't have pressed the issue. So it was kind of like the best of both worlds, I guess.
Sure.
But it was like the day of the deadline for sign up. So which is why he just pulled the trigger. And I had a week to come up with. So the format for that competition was you have 2 cocktails that you have to present, and then you have to create an on-the-fly cocktail with whatever of the, like they had 8 different sponsored spirits. They would pick one and say, hey, make something with this spirit as your 3rd cocktail.
Sure. So really throwing you in your first competition. It's not just one drink with one brand. Okay, cool.
No. So the first 2, one had to be like a twist on a classic, one had to be an original, and then the 3rd was the on the fly. And it's just so crazy. Some competitions, their format for this on the fly cocktail, they just said, bring whatever you think you'll need.
Oh, okay. Let me bring 4 coolers on
right.
a U-Haul, or I had like my bar kit.
Exactly. I had like a bus tub. I had like a giant cooler that had like just random stuff in it. I packed a lot of like jams because I'm like, well, these I don't have to refrigerate, so I'll just put this in my bus tub that I'm bringing because like it's a good cocktail ingredient that you can be, creative with. That's not something you have to refrigerate.
Yeah, that's great.
And I remember walking into that space and seeing everybody else and how they were approaching the competition and how confident they were. And I walk in and I remember very clearly going, oh, I'm not going to win, but I'm going to have a good time. I'm going to learn a lot. And I took it not super serious. Like I presented my cocktails very seriously and like had a good time doing that. But like, I didn't, I really did not think I had any chance of winning based on what I was seeing other people do. And then when they announced the winners, they did like 3rd place, 2nd place, 1st place, as you do. And I remember they called 3rd place, and I was like, oh, okay. I was really hoping to be, 3rd or 2nd, whatever. I know. And then they called 2nd place, and I was like, damn it. I really wish I had gotten 2nd. And then they called 1st place, and they called my name. Hey, and I was so shocked.
We love that.
I know. I was so shocked. I was like, what? Really?
No, I think that's so cool. Like,
it was my first competition.
Yeah, there's so many people, though, that win doing their first competition because you don't have any known variables, right? You don't have any baggage from these other competitions. You go in and you just have fun. You're not inside your own head. You present what you know, and obviously it shows if you're able to do that in your first one. And on a state level. That's incredible.
Yeah, that was kind of another one of those hooks for me in the bartending realm of like, okay, all right, maybe I do know what I'm talking about. Maybe this is something that I can, pursue more in depth and really become really entrenched in the industry, and that was my first competition.
Was there a cool prize?
I got a big cardboard check we love those. Big cardboard check. It's somewhere. I also have, they gave me a big poster of my face.
I love those.
I guess I still have it. It's in my apartment. I don't know what to do with it. I've tried to throw it away, and I tried to throw it away at my place of employment then, and somebody dug it out of the dumpster and hung it in the office. Which
exactly, because that's what would happen.
Of course. I was like, yeah, okay. And then I've tried to throw it away here, and my partner keeps like bringing it back.
I think you
can't throw this away.
Wrap it and give it to one of your parents for Christmas.
Oh yeah.
They'll hang it up forever.
Right. I don't know. My parents are at that age where they're like, hey, are you gonna come clean out this like bin of your stuff that we've had in the basement for 14, 15 years?
The stuff I haven't touched forever.
Right.
I didn't even know.
I don't think I need that. You can just donate that to Goodwill or do whatever you'd like with it. I don't need to be involved in that process.
Amazing. All right, so we caught the bug. We got first win, 1 for 1 under the belt.
Right.
So one of the other important things is how to choose the right competition. So you've already won one. How do you now start to choose what the right competitions are for you as you enter more and more throughout your career?
Well, after I'd won that first one, that was in 2018. I spent 2019 and, well, the beginning part of 2020, as we all know what happened.
Sure.
But I spent like 2019 applying to all these major competitions online, and it was a year of rejection, I want to say. Well, because for a lot of those big competitions, it's a lot of you submit a recipe into the void and never hear anything back. And I was doing a lot of that year. And because I was just doing like a shotgun approach of applying or submitting to everything that I found, and not spending as much time as I do now on the submissions. And I think I got cocky. I was like, oh, well, I had a week to prepare for my first competition. I nailed it. I got first place, even though I thought I wouldn't. So I was kind of just like rapid fire shotgun, like submitting to a lot of these major national competitions and not getting anywhere. Not unsurprising.
Yeah, but there's also nothing wrong with that too, because you are learning things during the process, right? I like to call it like failing forward, right? Because you're not actually failing. You're moving in the right direction because you're learning something. You're learning how to fill out the forms in the way that the competitions want you to. You're learning to read some of those fine print items that most people who submit don't catch because you need to use X ounces of an ingredient, or hey, there's no homemade ingredients, but you submitted 3, right? Like you're starting to like learn and dial in that process, right?
For sure. And learning different techniques as well. Because every time not every time, but oftentimes when I do a competition, I'm like, okay, I have not used this technique before, this this ingredient before, and try and push myself to work with something new or work with a new technique. And so even just submitting recipes into the void, as I like to call it, was still a beneficial experience because I was still growing growing in my craft essentially. So it wasn't all for nothing.
And you're building your repertoire too. You're building drinks that you could potentially change 1 or 2 things there and put on a menu somewhere, right? You're building your own library while you're doing all of this.
For sure.
Okay. So what's the right competition for you then? Right? Because you're moving through that process. You've submitted all these things into the void. How do we get to choose the right ones?
So the right ones, I would say, would be the ones that resonate the most with you. If you are passionate about a brand or just a style of spirit that you feel a connection with, then I would say go for that one and really leave the ones behind that you don't like. If you don't have an interest in the spirit or don't, want to if there's no draw, if you don't want to develop a cocktail for it, don't enter the competition. If you're just entering to enter, that would be the one I would skip.
Yeah, it's like applying for a job, right? Like don't apply for a job if you don't actually want it.
Exactly. And there's so many competitions out there, especially nowadays, like even more post-COVID than pre-COVID, I would argue. That you can really decide to be picky about which competitions you put your time and energy into.
Yeah, 100%. So what is the right competition for you now, right? Because you've moved obviously in a different trajectory in your career. So how has it changed from you doing that shotgun approach to what the right competition is for you currently?
Well, I've decided recently to stop doing smaller local competitions. Like the USBG chapter here in Raleigh, Durham is pretty active, and they do several competitions, like 2 or 3 a year, I would say, that are really fun. But it's kind of a distraction from like the larger competitions that I want to focus my attention on.
Mhm.
And so I've decided to kind of step away from doing like the smaller local ones, and also to allow for other bartenders to experience it and have the same experience that I had when I was just starting out in competitions. And,
100%. Let them dip their toe into the water for the first time. Let them gain
exactly,
that knowledge, right? And it
for
happens all
sure.
the time that people just keep entering every single competition and then they win a lot of them because they're good at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you're not building up the people around you and building that network. And I think that that's a true sign of, growth and career. So love to hear that you're kind of moving in that direction
Yeah.
too.
My goal is to start judging those smaller competitions, because judging competitions, I got to go back to the Iowa Restaurant Association one in 2019, the year after I won, and judge. And that was my first time judging a competition. And that is arguably almost as much or more fun than competing,
Yeah,
because it's
without the
way less
stress.
stressful.
Yeah, you don't have anxiety.
Absolutely. Yeah, you just show up and you get to drink drinks and you get to hang out with other bartenders and talk about drinks. And yeah, I mean, judging isn't always easy, because you'll be presented with a lot of good drinks and a lot of amazing bartenders in front of you, but it's a lot less stress than competing.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so we're gonna go on a little tangent here. If you're a judge
Yeah.
and you're in these competitions, what are
Mhm.
things that you look for as a judge in cocktails? Because you've seen both sides of the competition. So what do you look
Mhm.
for, in that role?
I look for some sort of innovation, or some sort of something that I haven't seen before, really. If whether it's an ingredient used, or a technique that is applied in a different way, or just a combination of ingredients, perhaps something that's out of the ordinary that makes me go, oh, you know, that's number one. Something creative, and somebody really putting themselves into the cocktail through their creativity is the number one thing I look for. And then aside from that, just small little technical details of, are they, meeting their wash lines in the cocktail, or are they meeting their lines on their jigger? Are they, stirring correctly, shaking, the adequate amount of time?
No.
Small things like that I do take into consideration, but depending on the scoring rubric, the creativity, it outweighs execution for me, because people do get nervous, and people,
Oh, terribly nervous. How many people's hands shake, when they're doing
I know,
competitions? It's crazy. You do it
I
every single
know,
day, but you get in front of like 2 or 3 people on a camera, and it's like I've never bartended once in my life.
right. It's like I bartend in front of people all the time, constantly, but if you put like two people where I'm like, oh, they're going to be judging me, then I'm like, oh, you got
Yeah,
to shake off the shakes before you get started.
truly one of the hardest parts.
Yeah.
All right, so we've chosen the right competition. How do we go about creating cocktails? Where do you draw inspiration from, and how do you move forward in that part of the process?
Well, the first step for, um, and this goes back to choosing the right competition, you got to read the rules a million times, like you had said, because things are easily missed. So, going through the rules, sometimes they offer inspiration. For example, the Nika Perfect
Perfect
Serve
serve.
competition that I just completed my cocktail. I haven't completed my submission yet, but it's due tomorrow. So,
Yeah,
but I put,
it'll be past by the time this episode goes live.
yeah,
So if you guys
exactly.
missed out on it, anyone listening or watching, next year.
But for an example, they offer inspiration in their prompt of what type of cocktail they want. A balance of duality between Scottish and Japanese. They want you to really blend those two different cultures. They want you to play with duality within your cocktail. So if the competition is of that nature, then I start there for my cocktail creation. But if it's really open-ended, like for example, World Class, the first submission that we did, it was just a twist on classic, I believe,
To
for that
serve
first
at a
submission.
special event. Yeah.
Yeah, for a special event. Yeah. And that's very open-ended. So then I draw more inspiration from uh, things like art, media, music can be an inspiration. I draw, much like most bartenders, I draw a lot of inspiration from food and specifically pastry chefs. I think there's a lot
Sure.
of crossover between pastry chefs and bartenders in this
Oh,
day and
tons.
age.
And they can be your best friend too if you work in a restaurant with
Absolutely.
a talented pastry chef. Like, who else deals with as much sugar as bartenders and pastry chefs? Let's be
Yeah,
honest
exactly.
here.
Yeah, and using different like techniques, you can learn a lot from a pastry chef. Like even doing like some sugar work, spun sugar for like a cocktail garnish can be really fun to do, and learning different techniques from them for sure. So I
Do
definitely pull a lot of inspiration from just food.
you have any favorite fallbacks, like favorite ingredient combinations or things that you seem to kind of revisit
Um,
over the years?
I go through phases, but right now I'm in a big lemongrass phase.
Yeah,
I've it honestly, it's such a good ingredient and it tastes like nostalgia to me because you, if you make a lemongrass syrup, it tastes to me like Fruit Loops.
it does.
Like
It's
it
that
does.
lemon. It's like that lemon lime kind of flavor that like
Yeah, yeah.
you smell it and it's like, oh yeah, that's a Fruit Loop.
Yeah, with like kind of that like almost a floral note too. It's like a something is like not quite fruity, but in that same realm. It's very nostalgic to me, and I think it works with a lot of other ingredients to kind of elevate and lift other ingredients. So that's one I've been playing with a lot lately that I should probably, step back a little bit and
Or
like,
don't
okay,
double down, go for it.
more lemongrass.
Yeah, only lemongrass.
So that's been a fun one that I've been playing with lately. I've also going back to that first competition that I won, the uh, the cocktail that I made for that third cocktail, the on the fly cocktail, I brought along honeydew juice. So I juiced a honeydew melon
Sure.
and brought the juice with me, and I ended up using that as part of it. And um, lately, I've been playing with honeydew juice a little bit more too, just to
Yeah,
go back to that original
pay homage to your
competition.
roots.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
I love that. So we've talked a little bit about different types of competitions. We've talked about the online submissions. We've talked about these in-person ones. So how do you go about preparing for a live cocktail competition that's very different from those online competitions? What's your step one? Lead me through the process.
Step one, obviously, write the recipe and, have everything that you need, like prepared, like prepped and everything ready to go. And then have a setup where you can practice making your cocktail in front of people. That was really, I think, this was really good advice that I wish I had heard a year ago or before I did World Class anyway, because when I was preparing for World Class, the speed round, I did a lot of practice runs in my apartment by myself in the quiet,
Mhm.
which in is good that you're getting those repetitions in, but in hindsight, I wish I had done more in front of people watching
Yeah.
because what I didn't anticipate was having that big of a crowd and being, distracted, playing into like the crowd and
Questions
um,
interrupting you.
yeah, like I wish I had definitely spent more time preparing in front of people, and so that's the biggest advice that I can give from hindsight being 2020 for me. Uh, that if you're preparing for in-person competition, a live competition, definitely spend some time doing your rounds in front of people who are going to be distracting and
Mhm.
be loud, and you know that will only prepare you for what the actual competition is going to be like.
100%. You can even go one step further. I had people sabotage my stuff in the middle of my practice round. So like,
Oh yeah.
I practice in quiet as well first, because everybody learns differently, right? It's
Right.
just, it's everybody's process. And like, I don't like anyone bothering me when I'm getting ready for things where I have to put on a show. I get it. But then you get in front of those people and it's like, okay, I have it dialed in. Now what is going to go wrong? And by having people maybe like swap out your, or just like ruin the on your peeler, they just take the metal part out of your peeler, and it's like, oh, okay, well now I have to peel garnishes without that. How do you go through this? Or maybe they like drop some hot water in your ice, and now your ice is all crappy, and you're like, okay, how do I go about this, right? So like taking those extra little steps to get ready. But those are the techniques. How do you practice your speeches? How do you get ready for creating those stories that you have to tell about the cocktails?
Yeah, I was really happy with the stories that I had concocted for World Class. So the process I went about doing that was just start with, there were 3 challenges we were all preparing for. So you just start with one and really just, again, read the prompt, read the rules a million times. And then really start to build a story, what they were looking for. For example, for the Zacapa challenge that we did, it was House Above the Clouds. They really wanted an immersive experience, something more than just a cocktail and a story, something that was more of an experience. And so taking that and really laying out, okay, how can I create that when really you are just making a cocktail and telling a story, but having musical element to tie everything in was really helpful. And then, especially when you want to incorporate so much brand knowledge that World Class wants you to do, start there. At least that's how I started for the Zacapa one, was just start with the brand knowledge that I want to make sure to incorporate. And then I looked at how can I build the story that makes all that kind of flow in a very very logical and a very like storytelling way. Yeah, natural way, for sure.
Well, how do you draft a story that can like move people, right? I think this is the hardest part, because anybody can get up and just give a history lesson, right? How do you make that story personal?
That's a great question. I think
without lying, because everybody's grandma had a favorite pie. I don't want to hear the
right. No, that's a great question. And yeah, I do think there is a little tendency to fib in the cocktail competition world. Like you were just saying, everyone's got a grandmother that taught them
Food Network
a recipe
does it too, right?
kind.
When it comes to food, everybody does that. It's like, oh, well, this is my sister's favorite casserole. This is my aunt's favorite cookie. Like I had this at my wedding 6 years ago. Like, stop. Like, how do you make something that feels genuine?
I do think bringing a human element into it helps make it feel genuine, not necessarily what we were just poking fun at, but for example, for my kind of one challenge was a very personal challenge to me. It was the Community Hero Challenge, where we were meant to go out and make a difference in our community. And I partnered with a nonprofit in Raleigh, North Carolina called A Place at the Table that helps fight food insecurities by creating a community space where it's essentially operates like a cafe. It's a pay what you can or pay it forward,
very cool,
or volunteer for a meal. So everybody's welcome, regardless of means. Everybody, it's meant to be like a community space, even for those experiencing homelessness, drug addiction, mental health problems, and really just meant to solve that one issue of food insecurity. So I got to.
Great. I love that.
Yeah, it's really a great organization, and I think more cities need spaces like that. But we're so lucky in Raleigh to have that. And I got to meet with them, partner with them, and take some food waste from their kitchen, turn it into a cocktail ingredient at my bar, put that on the menu, and we donated $2 for every cocktail sold back to them. So it's very
so great.
a cyclical solution. And yeah, we raised about $750 total in the 5 weeks we had that cocktail on.
That's pretty good.
That's not bad.
That's pretty good.
That was a big one for me, where I was like, I really put my energies into making like a real impact in the community. And I think by bringing that element of like humanity and bringing that aspect of we're actually helping feed people day to day, that was a really big a positive that I got on my feedback from the Kettle One Challenge for sure.
Oh, that's so cool. I think that's great.
Bringing in like an element of like humanity, I guess, is the best way to prepare.
It's true. I like to think about doing this the same way. Like, I create characters that I play in our D&D side of the campaign. I like to attach a little person or a little item of myself to the story, and it makes it that much more real, right? Like, but like an actual genuine side. And obviously you did that with your Kettle One Community Challenge, which is really, really cool to see. All right, we've talked about these positive things when it comes to competitions, and we all know that competitions aren't all glamour. They aren't all, stars, confetti, and trophies and making really cool drinks. There's another side to the competition, and that's a little bit of the darker side. So kind of enlighten us a little bit on, some things to watch out for if you decide to get into these competitions.
So I would say watch out for brands that just want free
drinks,
promotion, free
and
drink
recipes.
Free recipes, yeah, free promotion, stuff like that. And obviously, on some level, all cocktail competitions are, a form of promotion, a way for them to get recipes. But if they really look out for if they care about the bartender or not, there are several brands, I'm not going to name names, but there are several brands who do these national competitions, and then they invite bartenders to like a finals in some city somewhere in the US, but they don't pay for the bartenders to get there.
Yeah, no, we don't do that.
So,
sorry.
No.
Watch out for those. Read the fine print.
Yeah, read the fine print. Watch out for those. Don't do those. We don't do that. I'm not paying my way to go to a final for a big brand that obviously has the means to send 7 bartenders to a city. Like,
especially if it's across the country. Like, get out of here.
Exactly.
Flights aren't cheap.
Right. If it's a smaller competition or like a regional or something where I can drive there and back, that's
sure. And you're not losing a shift. You're not losing a shift for it. You're not losing wages. Yeah. You might have gone out that weekend anyways, right? Like that's, I totally understand that one. But yeah, I'm with you. No more of this. These brands taking advantage of bartenders.
Right. And then I'll just say the other dark side of competitions, which can be mitigated depending on who you are, and I'm just really bad at it, is the amount of money I've spent on R&D for like my personal home competition prep space, that I just trying to think of all the money I've spent in the last year doing competitions. I was like, man, I could have taken like a trip to Europe or something instead, or like, done a vacation, but instead I'm addicted to doing these competitions.
Well, right. It's not just the alcohol bottles you have to buy. It's the food prep ingredients to make syrups. Mm-hmm. It's your time and energy, that you're putting into it. It's the glassware that you purchase for these competitions. Mm-hmm. Or, hey, maybe my bar tools are pretty dinged up and I know there's going to be an opportunity for photos for my own self. Maybe I need some new bar tools, or maybe I need a new apron or a t-shirt, or maybe it's a gimmicky one and I got a costume. And now all of a sudden you're in for a pound instead of a penny. Exactly. And it starts to stack up. So what are some ways that you can avoid some of those costs? Do you have any little pieces of advice for anybody listening?
Well, you can always, it depends on where you work, but you can always ask if they are willing to purchase things at cost for you. For example, bottles, if they're willing to do that. So that'll cut down some of the cost for
Sure.
you
Instead of
for
paying
liquor.
$40 for a bottle, maybe you could get it for 24.25, and you just
Yeah,
reimburse the business. Or maybe they
exactly.
really like you and they're like, yeah, sure, you're worth it. We're gonna get some
Yeah.
branding out of this too. If the business is tagged, we'll get you a
Hmm.
bottle. Okay,
Exactly.
so asking your job, that's one piece of advice.
Yep. Or reps in the area as well. I've had reps encourage me to enter competitions, and then I'll ask them for a bottle, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, I'll see you with it next week or something."
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
know,
They
so
have that bottle
that's
of
also
warm gin in the back of their trunk that's been in there for a
right.
week. Here, why don't you
Exactly.
have it?
Exactly.
Love that.
Um, you can also, depending on if it's an ingredient used in your bar or your kitchen, ask for a small portion, maybe at cost, to um, to buy that instead of buying from like the grocery store or having to purchase something off Amazon or online somewhere. That's also another good tip to try and mitigate like expenses. These are all very circumstantial. But anywhere you can save money, I would encourage you to do so. Go through your distributors, whether it's like Cisco or U.S. Foods or whatever. That they often get pretty decent deals. And then you can always ask for samples from distributors as well. If you only need a small amount, just be like, hey, do you guys have a sample of this ingredient? Testing things out, see if we might want to put it on the menu.
Yeah, it's great.
And yeah.
We've worked with a lot of those kinds of people, like Monin Syrups. They'll send you samples
Mhm.
if you're looking for something. Perfect Puree, which sends like those natural food purees. They'll send you a whole bunch of samples too, so you can try things out. The answer is always no if you don't ask, and I think that that's the hardest thing. People think that there's going to
Yeah.
be some sort of rejection involved. It's not. It's not going to hurt anything. Just
Right.
ask.
Yeah. And even if the answer is no, oh well,
Yeah.
you tried.
Oh well.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, that was some really, really great insight into cocktail competitions across the board. But I do want to talk a little bit more about you, because we've talked a little bit about your passion for whiskey and kind of how you've developed this part of your career. And I think that we'd be lacking if we didn't talk about that at all. So I want to hear a little bit about your journey and what it's like to especially be a female working with whiskey in this field that has continually been growing since the early 2010s.
Yeah. My experience in the early 2010s is definitely a very big shift from what I experience now, which I think has to do with several factors, including the the general public is more open to having people who don't look like
Big bearded
traditional
white
whiskey
dudes.
drinkers. Yeah, big bearded white guys.
Sorry, Brandon.
Um,
I told you I'd do whatever I wanted this episode.
yeah, the industry or the general public is more open to having non-traditional whiskey professionals occupy that space. I also think that the way that I carry myself now versus when I was like 7, 8 years ago is very different as well. And it's been an interesting journey for sure. I mean, I still get the odd person at the bar who I'll, offer them the whiskey list and they're obviously interested. I say, let me know if you have any questions, step away so they have some time to peruse because we've got over 600 different whiskeys on the shelf at the bar that I work at currently.
Yeah.
And then I'll step away and the next man that walks past, whether it's, a server, our bar back, one of the other bartenders, sure, or, one of my managers, whoever the next man walks past, they're like, hey, man, let me ask you a question. And they'll ask a question that the person they're asking, if it's not a bartender, they're not going to know the answer. And I was literally standing. I was literally standing right there. It's like, I can help you. So it is infuriating. It's definitely lessened. So that is a good sign. I think people nowadays are getting more used to like women, non-binary, people of color being these whiskey authorities, as opposed to back in the day, like we were just talking about, how it was just the old white dudes that knew what they were talking about, and everybody else didn't have a clue in their eyes. So it's definitely been a challenge. I do think it helps as I'm getting older. I think it might be an ageist thing too, because as a mid 20s whiskey professional, didn't really have a lot of authority under my belt just because of my age. But now that I'm in my early to mid 30s, you know, that like, oh, okay, you're old enough. You probably have drank whiskey before. It's like, yeah, once or twice, maybe.
I usually tell people, no, never. You tell me everything, please. Right? Flip the script
Right.
on them. No,
And
that's so true.
It's funny too, because I'll get people that sit at my bar that try and educate me on whiskey very occasionally. It's definitely not the norm. And it's always funny when these guys that are so confident come in and just tell me things that are blatantly wrong.
Oh, so confident.
So confident. They're like, did you know bourbon can only be made in Kentucky? It's like, well, actually, that's not true.
Yeah. All right,
they're like, oh, I'm pretty
finance,
sure.
bro. Calm down, finance, bro. I'm going to teach you a thing or two.
Exactly. So, yeah, that's definitely declined. And I do think it's indicative of the state of the market in general, but also just individual me personal factors of getting older, getting a little bit more sick of the bourbon bros attitude towards me. So I don't really pay them any mind now. If they don't want to talk to me, that's fine. They can ask somebody else, but I'm going to be standing right over there, and then when the person you ask has to ask me to answer the question, then I'll step in.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think those are some really good tactics too, like knowing when to have those conversations and when people are open to it. I think that's half the battle as a bartender.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's the next certification? You've already done a bunch of these, right? You did the Canadian Whisky. Right. Was it the ABCs?
Yeah, the ABCs. Yeah, through Lush Life.
That was fantastic. So what's next after Scotch? Is it the Edinburgh Scotch Whisky certification?
I would love to get my diploma in Scotch whiskey from the Edinburgh Whisky Association. I really want to go to Scotland to do that. I think that would be the best. So that might be on my radar next, but right now I'm looking towards, like you said, the Scotch Whisky Professional from the Council of Whiskey Masters.
I think that's the best way to do it. Get your hands on, right? I mean, we're very fortunate here in the United States that we do get to go to Kentucky and have our hands on these. It's very accessible compared to a lot of other locations or people from around the world that don't get that experience. But when it comes to international whiskeys, obviously it's a little bit harder, but the best way is to learn from the people that make it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, 100%.
And funny that you mentioned Kentucky, because I am going again this year to the Bourbon Women annual conference.
Oh, amazing.
In Kentucky. And then right after that, the next day, I'm going to Camp Runamuck.
Oh, first time?
First time.
Oh, yep. That's amazing. Oh, you're going to have so much fun. Yes. Brandon was just there a couple weeks ago for the first session this year. I've been there twice as a camper and a counselor. You're going to have so much fun.
I'm so excited.
It's so good. Have you met any of your campers yet?
I know a couple of them, but they haven't announced cabins yet. So we haven't really got the ball rolling on meeting other people. But I do know like 3 people that are going through the same session. So I'll at least know a few faces.
It'll be great. One of my bartenders is actually going. So she'll be there with you. She's been on the show before, cool. Audrey. She used to work at Death & Co. with me once upon a time, nice. But now she'll be there too. So that's kind of neat. For those of you that don't know, Camp Runamuck is a summer camp for bartenders where you get to go to Kentucky for, I think it's 7 days now, and you get to go to 5 or 6 different distilleries. But the most important thing is you get to network with people from across the country, from across the world that, kind of share similar ideas and ideals as we do as hospitality professionals. So it's kind of a blending of the minds, and it's a really cool experience. They do 2 sessions a year. So if you don't, shout out to Lush Life, follow their stuff, shout out to Camp Run Amok and everybody that helps. That's awesome. All right. Well, actually, no, before we end the show, I have one last question for you. We ask everybody this that comes on the show. What is your favorite shift?
My favorite shift. Are we talking about like the favorite, like one shift that I've ever had that went really well, or like more broad strokes of like, do you prefer closing or the princess shift or opening?
The princess shift, amazing. We like to leave it open-ended. Your choice. There's always a common thread that people share regardless.
Yeah, my favorite type of shift is one that I am constantly busy for, not like super in the weeds, but like I'm always moving. And I work at a very large bar. We usually have at least 2 bartenders on, sometimes up to 6 or 7, depending on what's going on and how busy we are. But there's some nights or some mid shifts where I get to be by myself and be busy. Mm-hmm. And I really enjoy running the bar and the well by myself because I look at it in such like a meta, like holistic view of like, okay, that person just got a drink, they're halfway through, that person needs to be checked on next, but I have to grab this drink for this ticket and make my way this way. And I love having that like high level functioning of like, I'm doing all of it and I'm killing it. I'm crushing it. I'm busy. Like where you got that good flow going, that it's kind of the best feeling. It's almost like a rush or a high of some kind of like, man, I'm busy, but I'm killing it. And in the back of my mind, there is like an ego part of it too, where I'm like, I know some bartenders that would be stressed right now, but I'm chilling. I'm good. So that's kind of my favorite type of shift where I'm just like rocking.
Yeah. We always talk about how, like one of the common threads among this industry is like how we come through adversity, how we reach these challenges, and like how we handle those. And that's obviously kind of what you do, right? You see these shifts, you see these daunting things that are coming across you, and it's how we get through that. And it's kind of how we do it with the people around us and like everyone that has these similar ideals as us. And so that's kind of what is like that interconnective tissue that brings this industry together. So we always like to ask what everyone's favorite shift is. All right. Last but not least, I think we might have some shout outs. Ingrid, is there anyone, anything, any person, place, idea that you want to give a little love to? Or where can people find you on social media, in real life? What can they look forward to?
Yeah. First of all, I want to shout out to the whole Lush Life team, really, and Camp Run Amok and Portland Cocktail Week. They have been such a cool facilitator of the bartending community, especially in the United States, but even internationally. I have all the love in my heart for them. I've been to Portland Cocktail Week the last 2 years. I'm sad that I will not be able to attend this year because I'm helping open a new spot here in Raleigh. It's called High Rail, and you can find me there starting in October is when we're set to open. And you can find me on social media at Bartender Inga. That's Bartender INGA on Instagram.
Heck yeah, I love that. It's going to be a really cool bar, obviously, if you're running it. So that's going to be pretty neat. Maybe we'll
I'm excited.
And we'll drive up the coast. It's a pretty neat city to be in. And then, of course, absolutely. Those shout outs to Lush Life and Camp Run Amok. They're doing some amazing things for this industry. And if you haven't looked out for any of their events that Ingrid mentioned, you should definitely follow their socials to stay up to date. Not only do they do amazing conferences and like these summer camps we talked about, but they do free certifications for you to expand your education, and they have some really great programs. Shout outs for me. Probably my favorite podcast. It's called Bartenders, and you're probably listening to it or watching it right now. You can find us on social media at Bartenders. You can check out our website at www.bartender.com. We have amazing resources for mental and physical wellness here in the industry, some educational tools, and you can access all of our interviews that we have with bartenders like Ingrid, which is really great. But make sure you check us out, turn those notifications on, subscribe, follow, like. We like 5 stars, 5 stars only. If it's anything less, you're a bad person. So make sure that it is only the best, which is kind of what we're always aiming for. And lastly, I want to give a shout out to USBG and Diageo and World Class, because if it hadn't been for that, I wouldn't have met Ingrid and she wouldn't have been on the show here today.
Yeah.
So shout out to them for putting on competitions that bring bartenders together from all over the country. I think that that's absolutely incredible.
I second that.
Seconded indeed. All right. Well, I think it's that time. Let's clock out.
Right on.